The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Westbridge Academy, where every blade of grass seemed to whisper of old money and older traditions. 17-year-old Maya Chen walked through the wrought iron gates, her worn backpack a stark contrast to the designer bags that floated past her like expensive ghosts. She kept her head down, dark curls falling like a curtain across her face, but her eyes, sharp, observant, missed nothing. Maya had learned to read a room before she could properly read a book. It was a survival skill her father had taught her, though she'd never understood why until now. In the 3 weeks since her family had moved to this affluent Connecticut suburb, she'd cataloged every escape route, every blind spot, every face that turned away when she approached. Westbridge Academy was beautiful, pristine, and absolutely hostile to anyone who didn't belong to its carefully curated world. The first sign of trouble came during morning assembly. Maya slipped into the back row of the auditorium, hoping to remain invisible. But invisibility was a luxury she couldn't afford. 3 seats down, she caught the whispered conversation between 2 girls whose jewelry probably cost more than her family's monthly rent. "Did you see the new girl's shoes?" Brittany Whitmore's voice carried just enough to be heard. "Are those from Walmart?" "Probably," replied her companion, Chloe Vanderbilt, her last name carrying the weight of railroad money. "My mom says her family moved into the Riverside apartments. You know, the ones by the highway." Maya's jaw tightened. The Riverside apartments were modest, yes, but they were home. Her father had chosen them specifically because they were nondescript, forgettable, exactly what their family needed. What these girls didn't know was that Maya's father wasn't just any single parent struggling to make ends meet. He was Marcus Chen, a deep-cover operative for a government agency so classified that even Maya didn't know its full name. They moved every few years, always staying ahead of the shadows that followed their kind of work. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The assembly ended with the usual announcements about student excellence and community values, words that felt hollow when Maya noticed how students naturally segregated themselves in the hallways. She was one of only 12 black students in a school of 800, and the isolation was suffocating. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "How's the first day going, sweetheart? Remember what I taught you about situational awareness?" Maya typed back quickly. "All good, Dad. Just observing." But it wasn't all good. She could feel the weight of stares, the whispered comments, the way conversations stopped when she approached. This was different from their last assignment in Chicago, where diversity was celebrated rather than merely tolerated. Her first class was advanced literature with Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman whose pearls seemed to have been surgically attached to her neck. Maya took a seat in the middle row, trying to find that invisible sweet spot between front row eager and back row defiant. The discussion was about power dynamics in classic literature, ironic considering the power dynamics playing out in real time around her. "Maya, perhaps you could share your thoughts on how socioeconomic status affects character development in this novel." Mrs. Patterson's voice carried a subtle challenge, as if she were testing Maya's worthiness to be in an advanced class. Maya straightened, her father's lessons about confidence echoing in her mind. Socioeconomic status is often used as a weapon in literature, just like in real life. Characters use their privilege to maintain power structures, while those without privilege must either conform or find ways to subvert the system. Her voice was clear, articulate, and completely unfazed by the surprised looks around her. Behind her, she heard Brittany whisper to her friend, scholarship student trying to sound smart. After class, Maya walked to her locker, hyper-aware of the group following her. She'd learned to recognize the predatory movement patterns that preceded trouble. Her father had drilled her on threat assessment since she was 12. The group consisted of Brittany, Chloe, and 2 boys, whose confidence came from knowing they'd never face real consequences for their actions. "Hey, new girl," Brittany called out, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I'm Brittany. My family has been at Westbridge for 3 generations. My dad's on the board of trustees." Maya closed her locker slowly, turning to face them. "I'm Maya. Nice to meet you." "Maya," Chloe repeated as if testing the name. "That's exotic. Where are you from originally?" The question was loaded, designed to make Maya feel perpetually foreign. "I'm from here. Born in Boston, actually." And she didn't mention the dozen cities they'd lived in since then. "Oh, I just assumed." Brittany's smile was sharp as a blade. "Well, anyway, I wanted to let you know that we have a very tight-knit community here. Everyone knows everyone and we look out for each other." It's important to understand how things work. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Maya had seen this dance before, the establishment of hierarchy, the marking of territory. Her father had taught her that the best intelligence operatives were masters of reading between the lines, and these lines were written in neon. "I appreciate the welcome," Maya said carefully. "I'm just here to learn." "Of course you are," said one of the boys, Tyler Morrison, whose father owned half the real estate in town. "But learning isn't just about books, right? It's about understanding your place." The word place hung in the air like a challenge. Maya felt her muscles tense, not from fear, but from the ingrained response her father had trained into her. She'd been learning Krav Maga since she was 10, along with various other defensive techniques that came with having a parent in the intelligence community. These kids had no idea they were circling a predator disguised as prey. "I think I understand perfectly," Maya replied, her voice level. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" The dismissal was polite but firm. Brittany's eyes narrowed, recognizing the lack of submission. "We'll see you around, Maya. I'm sure we'll be great friends." As they walked away, Maya heard Tyler mutter, "She needs to learn some respect." The rest of the day passed in a blur of sideways glances and whispered conversations. Maya ate lunch alone in the library, preferring books to the cafeteria's social minefield. She noticed how the librarian, Mrs. Rodriguez, was one of the few adults who smiled at her genuinely. It was a small kindness in a day filled with microaggressions. If you're enjoying this story of courage and standing up to bullies, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you would do in this situation. The real test came during third period the next day. Maya was in advanced chemistry, one of her strongest subjects, when Brittany and her crew staged their first public humiliation. They'd somehow gotten hold of Maya's class schedule and had positioned themselves strategically around the lab. "Maya, would you like to be my lab partner?" Brittany asked sweetly, loud enough for the entire class to hear. "I just want to make sure you can keep up." Maya recognized the trap but had little choice. Refusing would paint her as antisocial. Accepting meant walking into whatever they had planned. She nodded and moved to Brittany's station. The experiment was simple, a basic acid-base reaction that Maya could have done in her sleep. But as she reached for the phenolphthalein indicator, Brittany accidentally bumped her elbow. The bottle slipped, crashing to the floor in an explosion of pink liquid and broken glass. "Oh my God, Maya, be careful!" Brittany's voice carried across the lab, drawing every eye to the mess. "Mr. Henderson, Maya broke the indicator bottle." Mr. Henderson, a nervous man who clearly wanted to avoid any conflict, hurried over. "Maya, please clean this up. Brittany, why don't you work with Chloe for the rest of the period?" As Maya knelt to clean up the mess, she heard the whispers around her. "So clumsy. Can't even handle basic equipment. Maybe she's not ready for advanced classes." But Maya had caught something the others missed. In the moment before the accident, she'd seen the calculating look in Brittany's eyes, the deliberate positioning of her elbow. This wasn't clumsiness. It was warfare. The pattern escalated over the following weeks. Maya would find her locker jammed with gum, her homework assignments mysteriously lost by teachers, her lunch tray accidentally knocked over in the cafeteria. Each incident was small enough to be dismissed as coincidence, but together they formed a systematic campaign of psychological warfare. Her father noticed the change immediately. Marcus Chen hadn't survived 15 years in intelligence work by ignoring subtle signs of distress. Over dinner one evening, he set down his fork and looked at his daughter with the focused attention she'd learned to recognize as his professional mode. "Maya, talk to me. What's really happening at school?" Maya had inherited her father's ability to compartmentalize, but she'd also inherited his protective instincts. She didn't want to worry him, especially when his work was already dangerous enough. "It's just typical high school stuff, Dad. Nothing I can't handle." Marcus studied her face with the intensity of someone trained to detect deception. "Sweetheart, I've taught you to read people and situations. Don't think I can't read you. Someone's targeting you." The word targeting hit Maya like a physical blow. In her father's world, targeting was a professional term with deadly implications. "It's not that serious, Dad. It's just some kids who think they're better than everyone else." "Privilege can be just as dangerous as any weapon," Marcus said quietly. "Sometimes more so, because it's protected by systems that regular people can't fight. But you're not regular people, Maya. You're my daughter." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I know I've trained you to be strong, to handle yourself in dangerous situations. But I also know that high school politics can be more brutal than anything I've faced in the field. Don't try to carry this alone." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. She'd been carrying it alone for weeks, telling herself she was strong enough to handle whatever these kids threw at her. But strength wasn't just about enduring. It was about knowing when to ask for help. "They're trying to break me down, Dad." Small things, but constant. And the worst part is that everyone acts like it's normal, like I should just accept it because that's how things are here. Marcus nodded grimly. Classic psychological operations. Death by 1,000 cuts. They're trying to make you internalize their message that you don't belong. He squeezed her hand. But here's what they don't understand. You belong anywhere you choose to stand. The question is, are you going to let them define your place? Or are you going to define it yourself? The next day brought a new escalation. Maya was in the gym for required physical education, changing in the locker room, when she discovered that her clothes were missing. She searched frantically through her locker, under benches, in the lost and found box. But her jeans and sweater had vanished. "Looking for these?" Brittany's voice came from behind her. Maya turned to see Brittany holding her clothes, surrounded by her usual entourage. "I found them in the trash. Someone must have thrown them away by accident." The clothes were soaked with something that smelled like spoiled milk and decorated with what looked like mustard stains. Maya's hands clenched into fists, muscle memory from years of training taking over. She could have Brittany on the ground in 3 seconds, could demonstrate exactly what happened when someone pushed the daughter of a federal agent too far. Instead, she took a deep breath and extended her hand. "Thank you for finding them." Brittany's smile faltered slightly. She'd expected anger, tears, or humiliation. Maya's calm acceptance threw her off balance. "I mean, you should probably wash them. They smell terrible." "I'll take care of it," Maya said evenly. She took the clothes and walked to the sink, rinsing them out with the same methodical precision her father used when cleaning weapons. The other girls watched in uncomfortable silence. "She's so weird," Chloe whispered. "She doesn't even react normally." But Maya had reacted, just not in the way they expected. She'd absorbed their attack, processed it, and chosen her response. It was a skill that would serve her well in the coming weeks, because Brittany and her friends were just getting started. The campaign against Maya intensified after the locker room incident. It was as if her refusal to break down had challenged them to try harder. They began recruiting other students, spreading rumors about her family's financial situation, questioning her academic credentials, and creating a social media campaign designed to isolate her completely. Maya found herself eating lunch alone every day, sitting in empty classrooms during free periods, and walking the long way to classes to avoid the hallways where her tormentors congregated. The isolation was suffocating, but it also gave her time to observe and plan. She began documenting everything, taking photos of her vandalized locker, screenshotting social media posts, recording conversations when possible. Her father had taught her that intelligence was about patterns, and the pattern here was clear. These students believed they were untouchable. The breaking point came during a school assembly about bullying prevention. The irony was lost on no one except the administration. Maya sat in the back row listening to the principal drone on about respect and inclusion, while Brittany and her friends passed notes and snickered just 3 rows ahead. "Westbridge Academy has 0 tolerance for bullying," Principal Davidson announced, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who'd never had to enforce his own policies. "We pride ourselves on creating a safe and inclusive environment for all students." Maya almost laughed. In the 3 weeks since the locker room incident, she'd reported 5 separate incidents to teachers and administrators. Each time she'd been told that they would look into it, or that she should try to work it out with the other students. The message was clear. She was expected to solve this herself, and if she couldn't, then maybe she didn't belong at Westbridge after all. After the assembly, Maya walked to her locker to find it had been vandalized again. This time, someone had used permanent marker to write, "Go back where you came from," across the metal surface. The words hit her like a physical blow, not because they were true, but because they represented everything she'd been fighting against. She stared at the words, feeling the weight of generations of students who'd been told they didn't belong, who'd been made to feel like intruders in spaces that should have been open to everyone. But she also felt something else. A cold, focused anger that reminded her exactly whose daughter she was. Maya pulled out her phone and took a photo of the vandalism. Then she walked directly to the principal's office, her spine straight and her purpose clear. She wasn't going to let this slide anymore. Principal Davidson looked up from his paperwork with the expression of a man who'd been interrupted during something important. "Maya, what can I do for you?" "Someone vandalized my locker," she said simply, showing him the photo. "I'd like to file a formal complaint." Davidson studied the image, his face showing a flicker of genuine concern before settling back into bureaucratic neutrality. "This is certainly inappropriate. Do you have any idea who might have done this?" "I have my suspicions, but I'd prefer to let the investigation determine that." Maya's voice was steady, professional. She'd learned to speak the language of authority from her father. "Of course. I'll have the custodial staff clean this up immediately, and we'll look into who might have had access to that hallway." Davidson made a note on his pad. "In the meantime, I hope you'll consider that sometimes these incidents are just pranks taken too far. High school can be a challenging time for everyone." Maya felt her jaw tighten. "Sir, with respect, this isn't a prank. This is harassment based on race, and it's been escalating for weeks. I've reported multiple incidents, and nothing has been done. Maya, I understand you're upset, but we need to be careful about making accusations. These are serious allegations that could affect students' college applications and future opportunities." Davidson's tone had shifted from concerned to protective, not of Maya, but of the students she was accusing. "What about my opportunities?" Maya asked quietly. "What about my right to feel safe at school?" Of course. Your safety is our top priority." The words were automatic, lacking any real conviction. "But we also need to consider that sometimes students from different backgrounds have different ways of communicating. What might seem hostile to you might just be typical teenage behavior." Maya stared at him, understanding finally that she was truly on her own. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. It protected the students who mattered while maintaining plausible deniability about the students who didn't. "I see," she said finally. "Thank you for your time, Principal Davidson." As she walked out of his office, Maya felt something shift inside her. She'd tried to work within the system, to follow the proper channels, to give the adults in charge a chance to do the right thing. But the system wasn't interested in doing the right thing. It was interested in maintaining the status quo. That evening, Maya sat in her room, staring at the photos on her phone. The vandalism, the accidents, the systematic campaign of humiliation. It was all there, documented and time-stamped. She thought about her father's work, about the way he gathered intelligence and built cases against people who thought they were above the law. Maybe it was time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. The next morning brought a new challenge. Maya arrived at school to find that her locker had been cleaned, but the metal door was dented and scratched from the removal process. More importantly, someone had started a rumor that she'd vandalized it herself for attention. "I heard she wrote that stuff herself," Tyler Morrison was saying to a group of underclassmen. "She's trying to play the victim card because she can't handle being at a real school." Maya walked past them without acknowledging the comment, but she filed it away with all the other intelligence she'd been gathering. These kids had no idea that they were being studied by someone trained by one of the best intelligence operatives in the country. The pattern continued for another week. Each day brought new humiliations, new attempts to break her spirit, new demonstrations of the power these students wielded. But Maya was no longer the isolated, vulnerable girl who'd walked through Westbridge's gates a month ago. She was her father's daughter, and she was beginning to understand exactly what that meant. The transformation became clear during her next encounter with Brittany and her crew. It happened in the cafeteria, during the lunch period when the social hierarchy was most visible. Maya was sitting alone as usual, working on homework while she ate. "Hey Maya," Brittany called out, her voice carrying across the dining hall. "I have a question for you." Maya looked up from her calculus textbook, her expression neutral. "Yes? My mom was wondering if your family might be interested in some of our old clothes. We have tons of stuff we don't wear anymore, and she thought you might be able to use them." Brittany's voice was loud enough to ensure that half the cafeteria heard her offer. The silence that followed was deafening. Every student in the vicinity turned to watch Maya's reaction, waiting to see if she would finally crack, finally give them the emotional response they'd been working toward for weeks. Maya closed her textbook slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. She stood up, walked over to Brittany's table, and looked down at the girl who'd been tormenting her for over a month. "Thank you for the offer," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness. "But I'm not interested in your charity. I'm also not interested in your games, your little power plays, or your attempts to make me feel like I don't belong here." Brittany's smile faltered. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected. Maya continued, her voice gaining strength. I belong here just as much as you do. The difference is that I earned my place through merit, not through who my parents are or how much money they have. And if you think you can break me down with your petty high school politics, you're going to be very disappointed. The cafeteria had gone completely silent. Even the lunch staff had stopped working to listen. Maya had just done something that no one did at Westbridge. She'd directly challenged the social order. Excuse me? Brittany's voice was sharp with disbelief. Who do you think you're talking to? I'm talking to someone who's never had to earn anything in her life, who mistakes privilege for power, and who's about to learn that not everyone is afraid of her family's money. Maya's voice was calm, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something that made several students unconsciously lean back in their chairs. Tyler Morrison stood up, his face flushed with anger. You need to watch your mouth, scholarship girl. You're nothing here. You're nothing anywhere. Maya turned to face him, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. In her eyes, Tyler saw something that made him take an involuntary step backward. It was the look of someone who'd been trained to handle threats, someone who'd inherited more than just her father's intelligence. Sit down, Tyler, Maya said quietly. You're embarrassing yourself. The command in her voice was unmistakable. Tyler, who'd never been spoken to that way by anyone, especially not by someone he considered beneath him, found himself actually sitting down before he realized what he was doing. Maya looked around the cafeteria, making eye contact with as many students as possible. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the room. I know what you all think of me. I know what you've been told about me. But let me tell you what I think of you. I think you're so desperate to maintain your little bubble of privilege that you'll attack anyone who reminds you that the world is bigger than this school. I think you're so afraid of losing your power that you'll try to destroy anyone who threatens it. And I think you're about to learn that you picked the wrong person to mess with. She gathered her books and walked out of the cafeteria, leaving behind a room full of students who were seeing her clearly for the first time. The quiet girl who'd been absorbing their attacks for weeks was gone, replaced by someone who looked remarkably like her father when he was in full operational mode. The cafeteria confrontation marked a turning point, but not in the way Maya had hoped. Instead of backing down, Brittany and her crew seemed to view Maya's display of strength as a declaration of war. The attacks became more coordinated, more vicious, and more public. Within hours of the lunch incident, social media was flooded with posts about the angry scholarship girl who'd attacked innocent students. The narrative was carefully crafted to paint Maya as the aggressor, while Brittany and her friends positioned themselves as victims of her unprovoked hostility. Maya watched the digital assassination unfold from her bedroom, her phone buzzing with notifications as screenshots of the posts flooded her feed. The comments were brutal, ranging from typical high school cruelty to outright racist harassment. Her father knocked on her door just as she was reading a particularly vicious post that suggested she should go back to the ghetto where she belongs. Maya, can I come in? Marcus's voice carried the careful tone he used when he sensed his daughter was in distress. She looked up from her phone, her eyes bright with unshed tears. They're destroying me, Dad. Online, at school, everywhere. I stood up to them, and now it's 10 times worse. Marcus sat down on her bed, his expression grave. Show me. Maya handed him her phone, watching as his face grew progressively darker while he scrolled through the posts. She saw the moment when his professional instincts kicked in, when he stopped being just a concerned father and became a federal agent analyzing a threat. These posts are coordinated, he said finally. Look at the timing, the similar language, the way they're all reinforcing the same narrative. This isn't just teenage drama. This is a systematic campaign. What does that mean? Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew. It means they're treating you like an enemy combatant. They're using psychological warfare tactics to isolate you, discredit you, and break you down. Marcus looked up from the phone, his eyes hard. The question is, are you going to let them win? Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying that you have skills they don't know about. You have training they can't imagine. And you have intelligence-gathering capabilities that would make their parents' corporate espionage look like child's play. Marcus set the phone down carefully. But more importantly, you have something they don't have, the moral high ground. Dad, I can't use intelligence techniques on high school students. That's insane. Is it? Maya, These kids are using their parents' money and influence to destroy your reputation and your future. They're counting on you fighting fair while they use every advantage they have. Marcus stood up, pacing to the window. I'm not saying you should hurt anyone. I'm saying you should level the playing field. Maya stared at her father, seeing him clearly for the first time. This wasn't just about teaching her to defend herself. This was about teaching her to win. What did you have in mind? Intelligence gathering, pattern analysis, strategic planning, everything I've been teaching you since you were old enough to understand that the world isn't fair. Marcus turned back to her. But first you need to understand something. This isn't just about you anymore. What's happening here is a microcosm of what happens everywhere when people with power encounter people who threaten their worldview. If you let them win, you're not just failing yourself, you're failing everyone who comes after you. The weight of his words settled over Maya like armor. She'd been thinking of this as a personal battle, but her father was right. It was bigger than that. Every student who'd been bullied, every outsider who'd been made to feel unwelcome, every person who'd been told they didn't belong, they were all counting on her to find a way to fight back. Okay, she said quietly. Teach me. The next morning, Maya walked into Westbridge Academy with new eyes. Instead of trying to avoid her tormentors, she began studying them with the methodical precision her father had taught her. She noted their patterns, their relationships, their vulnerabilities. She observed the adults who enabled them, the systems that protected them, and the unspoken rules that governed their behavior. During first period, she sat in the back of advanced history and watched as Mr. Thornton, the department head, called on Brittany to answer a question about the civil rights movement. Brittany's response was historically inaccurate and culturally insensitive, but Mr. Thornton nodded approvingly and moved on without correction. When Maya raised her hand to provide the correct information, Mr. Thornton's expression tightened. I think we should move on to the next topic, Maya. We don't want to get bogged down in details. Maya lowered her hand, filing the interaction away with all the other data she was collecting. The pattern was clear. These teachers weren't just passive enablers, they were active participants in maintaining the social hierarchy. At lunch, instead of sitting alone, Maya positioned herself where she could observe the cafeteria's social dynamics. She watched how information flowed through the student body, how alliances were formed and broken, how power was exercised and challenged. It was like studying a foreign culture, except this culture was designed to exclude her. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. Remember, intelligence without action is just curiosity. What's your next move? Maya looked around the cafeteria, her gaze settling on Brittany's table. The girl was holding court, surrounded by her usual entourage, but Maya noticed something she'd missed before. Brittany's power wasn't absolute. It was performance. She was constantly working to maintain her position, constantly proving her dominance through small acts of cruelty and control. That afternoon, Maya made her first strategic move. She'd noticed that Brittany had been cheating on her advanced literature essays, copying large portions from online sources and banking on the fact that Mrs. Patterson wouldn't bother to check the work of a student from such a good family. Maya had documented 3 instances of plagiarism, complete with screenshots and timestamps. She compiled the evidence into a clear professional report and submitted it anonymously to the school's Academic Integrity Board. She didn't expect immediate action, but she wanted to plant seeds that would grow into larger problems. The harassment continued, but Maya began to notice cracks in her tormentor's facade. Tyler Morrison's confidence wavered when Maya looked at him directly. Chloe Vanderbilt seemed uncomfortable when Maya was nearby, as if she sensed that she was being watched and evaluated. Only Brittany maintained her aggressive stance, but even she seemed to be working harder to maintain her image. The real breakthrough came when Maya discovered that her father's government connections extended beyond his own agency. During dinner one evening, she asked him about the legal implications of what was happening at school. Hypothetically, she said, if someone were documenting a systematic campaign of harassment, what would they need to build a case? Marcus looked up from his dinner, his expression thoughtful. Hypothetically, they'd need evidence of a pattern, documentation of institutional failure to address the harassment, and proof that the harassment was based on protected characteristics like race or economic status. And if they had all that, then they'd have grounds for a civil rights complaint with the Department of Education, a lawsuit against the school district, and potentially criminal charges if the harassment escalated to threats or violence. Marcus set down his fork. But they'd also need to be prepared for the targets to fight back with everything they have. Maya nodded slowly. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. If I were building a case against these students in the school, would you help me? Marcus studied his daughter's face, seeing the determination that reminded him of himself at her age. Maya, if you're asking whether I'd support you in seeking justice through legal channels, the answer is absolutely yes. If you're asking whether I'd help you gather evidence using methods that might be unconventional, then we'd need to have a very careful conversation about ethics and legality. I'm asking whether you'd teach me to be as good at this as you are at what you do. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Maya, what I do is dangerous. It's necessary, but it's dangerous. If I teach you these skills, you'll carry them for the rest of your life. Are you sure you want that responsibility? Dad, I'm already carrying it. The question is whether I'm carrying it with the right tools. That night, Marcus began teaching Maya advanced surveillance techniques, digital intelligence gathering, and strategic psychological assessment. He showed her how to build profiles of her targets, how to identify pressure points, and how to predict behavior patterns. It was like getting a masterclass in human nature from someone who'd spent his career studying the worst of humanity. Remember, he told her as they worked late into the night, the goal isn't to destroy them. It's to create consequences for their actions. There's a difference between justice and revenge. Maya absorbed every lesson, every technique, every insight. She began to understand that what was happening at Westbridge wasn't just about teenage cruelty. It was about power structures that existed at every level of society. The students were just practicing the same tactics their parents used in boardrooms and country clubs. The next phase of her plan began during the following week. Maya had identified the key relationships that kept Brittany's power structure intact, and she began to systematically undermine them. She didn't attack directly. Instead, she planted seeds of doubt, created small fissures in the group's solidarity, and waited for the natural paranoia of high school politics to do the rest. It started with a carefully crafted social media post that suggested some members of Brittany's inner circle were talking behind her back. Maya had observed enough of their interactions to know exactly which insecurities to target. Within hours, the group was fractured by suspicion and accusation. While her tormentors were distracted by internal conflict, Maya continued gathering evidence. She documented every instance of harassment, every failure by the administration to address the situation, every example of how the school's disciplinary policies were applied differently based on social status. This is about to get intense. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on because stories like this one show us what real strength looks like. What's your prediction for how this ends? Drop it in the comments below. Her breakthrough came when she discovered that Brittany's father, Robert Whitmore, had been making substantial donations to the school in exchange for favorable treatment of his daughter. Maya found evidence of grade changes, disciplinary records that had been expunged, and recommendation letters that had been written by teachers who'd barely interacted with Brittany. The corruption went deeper than she'd imagined. Principal Davidson wasn't just protecting privileged students out of institutional inertia. He was protecting them because their parents were essentially buying their way out of consequences. Maya compiled all of this information into a comprehensive report that read like a federal investigation. She had names, dates, amounts, and documentation that would make any lawyer salivate. But she also knew that going public with this information would make her a target not just of the students, but of their powerful parents. She needed an ally, someone with the authority and integrity to act on what she'd discovered. The answer came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Rodriguez, the school librarian who'd been kind to Maya from the beginning. During a quiet moment in the library, Maya approached Mrs. Rodriguez with a carefully worded question. If a student discovered evidence of corruption in the school administration, who would they report it to? Mrs. Rodriguez looked up from her cataloging work, her expression suddenly alert. That would depend on the nature of the corruption. Why do you ask? Hypothetically, Maya said, if someone found evidence that grades were being changed for money, that disciplinary records were being falsified, and that the administration was covering up harassment based on race and economic status, where would they take that information? Mrs. Rodriguez set down her work entirely. Maya, are you asking me this hypothetically, or are you asking me this because you have evidence? Maya studied the librarian's face, using the people-reading skills her father had taught her. She saw intelligence, integrity, and a carefully controlled anger that suggested Mrs. Rodriguez had been witnessing the corruption for years, but hadn't known how to fight it. "I'm asking because I have evidence," Maya said quietly. "A lot of evidence." Mrs. Rodriguez glanced around the empty library, then leaned forward. "Maya, what you're describing could bring down this entire administration. Are you prepared for that kind of fight?" "I'm prepared to do what's right," Maya replied. "The question is whether anyone else is." "There's someone you need to meet," Mrs. Rodriguez said after a moment. "Dr. Sarah Williams. She's a civil rights attorney who graduated from Westbridge 20 years ago. She's been waiting for someone like you, someone with the evidence and the courage to take on this system." That evening, Maya sat in a coffee shop downtown, across from a woman who looked like she could step into a courtroom and take on the Supreme Court without breaking a sweat. Dr. Williams reviewed Maya's evidence with the methodical precision of someone who'd built a career on cases just like this one. "This is extraordinary work," Dr. Williams said finally. "The level of documentation, the attention to detail, the way you've connected the patterns of harassment to the institutional corruption. This is better than most professional investigations I've seen. My father taught me well," Maya said simply. "Your father is in law enforcement?" "Something like that." Maya wasn't ready to reveal the full extent of her father's work, but she could see that Dr. Williams understood there was more to the story. "Maya, what you've uncovered here is a federal civil rights case. The harassment you've experienced, combined with the school's deliberate indifference and the evidence of pay-to-play corruption, gives us multiple avenues for legal action." Dr. Williams leaned forward. "But I need to be clear about what this means. If we move forward, you'll be taking on some of the most powerful families in this county. They'll fight back with everything they have." "Let them fight," Maya said, her voice carrying an edge that reminded Dr. Williams of some of her most determined clients. "I'm not backing down." "There's something else you should know," Dr. Williams continued. "I've been tracking patterns of discrimination at Westbridge for years. You're not the first student to experience this kind of harassment, but you are the first one with the skills and evidence to fight back effectively. If we win this case, we'll be setting a precedent that could protect hundreds of future students." Maya felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders again. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about creating systemic change that would outlast her time at Westbridge. "What do you need from me?" Maya asked. "I need you to be ready for the hardest fight of your life, and I need you to document everything that happens from this point forward, because once we file this complaint, they're going to escalate their attacks." Dr. Williams was right. Within days of their meeting, the harassment at school intensified dramatically. It was as if Brittany and her crew sensed that something had changed, that Maya was no longer just enduring their attacks, but actively preparing to fight back. The escalation began with vandalism that crossed clear legal lines. Maya arrived at school to find her car's tires slashed and racist graffiti spray-painted across the windshield. The message was unmistakable: "Go home or else." Maya photographed everything, filed a police report, and added the incident to her growing case file. But she also felt a cold anger building inside her, the same controlled fury she'd seen in her father when he talked about the people he hunted in his professional life. The next attack came during gym class. Maya was running laps around the track when Tyler Morrison and two of his friends cornered her in a secluded area behind the equipment shed. For the first time since the harassment began, Maya felt genuinely threatened. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Tyler's voice was different now, harder, more dangerous. "Running to lawyers, filing complaints, stirring up trouble for people who matter." Maya kept running, trying to get past them, but they spread out to block her path. Her training kicked in automatically: assess the threat, identify escape routes, prepare for physical confrontation. "I don't know what you're talking about," Maya said, but her body was already shifting into a defensive stance. "Don't play dumb," said Jake Morrison, Tyler's older brother who'd graduated the previous year, but still seemed to spend most of his time hanging around the school. "My dad got a call from the school board. Someone's been spreading lies about our families." Maya realized that her investigation had started to rattle the right people. If the school board was involved, it meant her evidence was being taken seriously, but it also meant that the stakes had just gotten much higher. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Maya said carefully, still looking for a way out of the situation. "The only misunderstanding is you thinking you can come to our school and cause trouble without consequences," Jake said, stepping closer. "Maybe it's time someone taught you how things really work around here." Maya's training screamed at her to act, to disable the threat before it escalated further. She could have Jake on the ground in seconds, could use his own momentum against him, could demonstrate exactly why it was a bad idea to threaten someone who'd been trained by a federal agent. Instead, she made a different choice. She pulled out her phone and hit record. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?" she said clearly. "I want to make sure I understand what you're threatening to do." The change in Jake's expression was immediate. He'd been counting on intimidating a helpless victim, not someone who was calmly documenting his threats. "Put that phone away." "Why? Are you afraid someone might see how you treat students who can't fight back?" Maya's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it that made all three boys unconsciously take a step backward. "This isn't over," Tyler muttered. But the moment had passed. They'd lost the initiative, and Maya had gained something much more valuable than a physical victory. She had evidence of explicit threats on video. That evening, Maya showed the recording to her father, watching as his expression grew progressively darker. When the video ended, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Maya, this has moved beyond harassment. These boys just threatened you with physical violence. That's assault, and it's a felony." His voice carried the cold precision she'd learned to associate with his professional mode. "The question is, how do you want to handle this? What are my options?" "Legal. We turn this over to the police and the district attorney. The video is clear evidence of criminal threats." Marcus paused. "Or we handle it ourselves." Maya looked at her father sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means I have resources that go beyond what's available to civilian families. It means I can make sure these boys understand that threatening you was the biggest mistake of their lives." Marcus's voice was calm, but Maya could see the federal agent beneath the concerned father. "But it also means crossing lines that can't be uncrossed." Maya considered her options. The legal route would take time, and there was no guarantee that the local justice system would take the threat seriously. But using her father's resources would mean abandoning the moral high ground that had been guiding her actions. "Dad, if we go the legal route, how long before there are real consequences?" "Months, maybe longer. And that's assuming the local prosecutor is willing to take on these families." Marcus sat down across from her. "Maya, I need you to understand something. The boys who threatened you today, their families have been untouchable in this community for generations. They're not going to face real consequences unless someone makes them face consequences." "Then we make them face consequences," Maya said firmly. "But we do it the right way. We use the system, and when the system fails, we build a better system." Marcus smiled, and Maya saw pride in his expression. "That's my daughter, always looking for the hardest path. You taught me that the right path and the easy path are usually different things." The next morning, Maya and her father walked into the police station together. Detective Maria Santos listened to their story with growing concern, reviewing the evidence Maya had compiled over the previous weeks. The video of the threats was the tipping point. "This is clearly criminal behavior," Detective Santos said finally. "I'll be issuing arrest warrants for Jake Morrison and Tyler Morrison on charges of criminal threats and conspiracy. The third boy will be charged as well." "What about the harassment campaign?" Maya asked. "The systematic targeting, the vandalism, the institutional cover-up? That's where things get more complicated," Detective Santos admitted. "The criminal charges are clear-cut, but the civil rights violations fall under federal jurisdiction. You'll need to work with the FBI's Civil Rights Division." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The FBI. Her father's world was about to collide with her high school experience in ways she'd never imagined. That afternoon, Special Agent Jennifer Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, sat in their living room, reviewing Maya's evidence with the same methodical precision that Detective Santos had shown. But Agent Chen's questions were more sophisticated, more focused on the systemic nature of what Maya had uncovered. This pattern of harassment, combined with the institutional indifference and evidence of corruption, meets the criteria for a federal civil rights investigation, Agent Chen said finally. "We'll be opening a formal case." "What does that mean for Maya?" Marcus asked, though Maya suspected he already knew. "It means she'll be a protected witness in a federal investigation. It also means that anyone who retaliates against her will be facing federal charges." Agent Chen looked directly at Maya. "But it also means that your life is about to become very complicated. Federal cases take time, and the people you're accusing have resources that most criminals don't have." Maya nodded. She'd known this moment would come, the point where she'd have to decide whether she was truly committed to seeing this through to the end. Agent Chen, I have one question, Maya said. If we do this, if we go all the way with the federal case, will it actually change anything? Or will it just be another investigation that gets buried in bureaucracy? Agent Chen smiled grimly. Maya, in my experience, the cases that create real change are the ones brought by people who refuse to give up. From what I've seen of your work, you don't strike me as someone who gives up easily. I don't give up at all, Maya said simply. The news of the criminal charges against the Morrison brothers spread through Westbridge Academy like wildfire. By the time Maya arrived at school the next morning, the entire student body seemed to know that she was responsible for their arrests. The reaction was swift and brutal. Students who'd never spoken to her before whispered as she passed. Teachers who'd ignored her for weeks suddenly watched her with suspicious eyes. Even Mrs. Rodriguez seemed nervous when Maya approached the library, glancing around as if she were afraid of being seen talking to her. But something had changed in how other students looked at her. Along with the hostility and fear, Maya saw something she'd never seen before: respect. The quiet kids, the outsiders, the students who'd been living in the shadows of Westbridge's social hierarchy, they looked at her like she was a hero. During lunch, a sophomore named David Kim approached her table hesitantly. Maya, I just wanted to say thank you. Maya looked up from her book, surprised. For what? For standing up to them. Tyler Morrison pushed me into a locker last month and called me, well, some things I won't repeat. I never reported it because I knew nothing would happen. David's voice was quiet but determined. But now, maybe something will happen. Other students began approaching her throughout the week. They shared their own stories of harassment, discrimination, and institutional indifference. Maya realized that her case wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern that had been going on for years. She began documenting these stories as well, building a comprehensive picture of how Westbridge Academy had failed its students. Each story added weight to the federal case, but they also added weight to Maya's sense of responsibility. The retaliation from Brittany and her remaining allies was swift and vicious. Unable to use their usual tactics now that Maya was under federal protection, they turned to character assassination and social media warfare. They painted her as a troublemaker who was destroying the school's reputation, an outsider who couldn't handle normal teenage interactions. But their attacks felt hollow now. Maya had moved beyond caring what these people thought of her. She had bigger battles to fight and more important work to do. The turning point came during a school board meeting that had been called to address the recent incidents at Westbridge Academy. Maya attended with her father and Dr. Williams, sitting in the back row while the board discussed their situation as if she weren't there. Board member after board member spoke about the need to protect the school's reputation and avoid overreacting to typical teenage conflicts. Robert Whitmore, Brittany's father, delivered a particularly eloquent speech about how outside agitators were trying to destroy an institution that had served the community for generations. When Maya was finally given a chance to speak, she walked to the podium with the same controlled confidence her father displayed in high-stakes situations. She looked out at the room full of powerful adults who'd spent the evening discussing her life like she was a problem to be solved, rather than a student they'd failed to protect. My name is Maya Chen, she began, her voice clear and strong. For the past 3 months, I've been systematically harassed, threatened, and marginalized by students at Westbridge Academy. I've been told I don't belong here, that I should go back where I came from, that my family's financial situation makes me inferior to my classmates. The room was completely silent. But the harassment isn't what brought me here tonight. What brought me here is the systematic failure of every adult in this room to protect me and students like me. When I reported the harassment, I was told it was just teenage behavior. When my locker was vandalized with racist graffiti, I was told it was probably a prank. When I was threatened with physical violence, I was told to work it out with the other students. Maya's voice grew stronger as she continued. But I've discovered that this isn't just negligence, it's corruption. I have evidence that grades have been changed for money, that disciplinary records have been falsified, and that this administration has created a two-tiered system of justice based on how much parents can donate to the school. The silence in the room was deafening. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces pale. So here's what's going to happen, Maya continued, her voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible coming from a 17-year-old girl. The FBI is conducting a federal civil rights investigation into this school. The Department of Education is reviewing your federal funding. and I'm working with civil rights attorneys to ensure that every student who's been failed by this system gets justice." She paused, looking directly at Robert Whitmore. "You can try to destroy my reputation. You can try to intimidate my family. You can even try to have me expelled. But you can't stop what's already in motion. This system is going to change, whether you want it to or not." Maya walked back to her seat, leaving behind a room full of adults who were finally beginning to understand that they were dealing with someone far more dangerous than a typical high school student. They were dealing with someone who'd been trained by a federal agent, someone who understood how power really worked, and someone who absolutely refused to back down. As they left the meeting, Dr. Williams put a hand on Maya's shoulder. "That was extraordinary. You just served notice to some of the most powerful people in this county that their days of operating with impunity are over." "Good," Maya said simply. "It's about time." The weeks following the school board meeting transformed Westbridge Academy into a battlefield. With the Morrison brothers facing criminal charges and a federal investigation underway, the school's power structure began to crumble. But Brittany Whitmore wasn't ready to surrender. Her final gambit came during the spring semester's most important event, the Academic Excellence Awards ceremony. Parents, donors, and community leaders would all be present, making it the perfect stage for one last attempt to destroy Maya's credibility. Maya knew something was planned when she overheard whispered conversations that stopped abruptly whenever she approached. Her father's training had taught her to recognize when an attack was being coordinated, and every instinct told her that Brittany was preparing something big. The ceremony was held in the school's grand auditorium, with Maya seated in the front row as one of the academic award recipients. Principal Davidson had been forced to acknowledge her achievements publicly, though his smile looked like it physically pained him. As Maya walked to the stage to receive her Advanced Literature Award, she noticed Brittany and her remaining allies positioned strategically around the auditorium. They had phones ready, expressions expectant. Whatever they'd planned was about to happen. The attack came as Maya reached for her award. Someone had rigged the microphone to feedback at an ear-splitting volume, causing her to stumble backward. At the same moment, Brittany's crew began shouting accusations that had been carefully timed to sound spontaneous. "She doesn't deserve that award," Brittany called out. "She cheated her way into advanced classes. Her family doesn't even belong in this community," Tyler's girlfriend added, her voice carrying across the auditorium. But Maya had been expecting this. As the chaos erupted around her, she did something that no one anticipated. She smiled. Calmly, she adjusted the microphone, waited for the feedback to stop, and began to speak. "Thank you for this award," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. "But before I accept it, I think everyone here should know what's really been happening at Westbridge Academy." Principal Davidson tried to cut her off, but Maya had positioned herself perfectly. The microphone was hers, and she intended to use it. "For months I've been systematically harassed because of my race and my family's economic status. I've been told I don't belong here, had my property vandalized, and been threatened with violence. But the worst part isn't what these students did to me. It's how the adults in this room allowed it to happen." The auditorium had gone completely silent. Parents leaned forward in their seats, their faces showing confusion and growing concern. "I have documentation of grade changes purchased with donations. I have evidence of disciplinary records being falsified to protect wealthy students. I have recordings of threats and video evidence of harassment." Maya's voice remained calm, professional. "And I have testimony from dozens of students who've experienced the same treatment but were too afraid to speak up." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a thick folder. "All of this evidence has been turned over to the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Federal agents are conducting interviews as we speak. Criminal charges have already been filed against students who crossed legal lines." The silence was broken by Robert Whitmore standing up angrily. "This is ridiculous. You can't let this girl destroy our school with her lies." Maya turned to face him directly. "Mr. Whitmore, would you like me to read the specific documentation of payments your family made to change Brittany's grades? Because I have bank records, email correspondence, and witness testimony." Whitmore's face went pale. Around the auditorium, other parents began whispering urgently to each other. The carefully maintained facade of respectability was cracking. "The truth is," Maya continued, "this school has been operating two different systems of justice. One for students whose parents can afford to buy their way out of consequences, and another for everyone else. That system ends today." Dr. Williams stood up from the audience. "I'm Dr. Sarah Williams, civil rights attorney. As of this morning, we've filed a federal lawsuit against this school district for systematic discrimination and violation of civil rights. We're also requesting a Department of Education investigation into the misuse of federal funding. The chaos that erupted was immediate and absolute. Parents began shouting questions, students pulled out phones to record everything, and school board members tried unsuccessfully to regain control of the situation. But through it all, Maya remained calm at the podium. She had done what she came to do. She had exposed the truth in the most public way possible, in front of the very people who had enabled the system's corruption. As security finally moved to clear the stage, Maya looked directly into Brittany's shocked face. "You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone who matters," she said quietly. "Instead, you gave me the perfect platform to tell the truth about what this place really is." The aftermath was swift and comprehensive. Within days, Principal Davidson had resigned to pursue other opportunities. 3 teachers were suspended pending investigation. The school board called for a complete review of disciplinary policies and academic integrity procedures. The Morrison brothers pled guilty to criminal charges and were sentenced to community service and mandatory anger management counseling. Jake Morrison, the older brother, faced additional charges for his role in organizing the harassment campaign. Brittany's family quietly transferred her to a private school in another state after evidence of the grade-changing scandal became public. Her father's business relationships suffered as clients distanced themselves from the controversy. But the most important changes were systemic. The federal investigation resulted in new oversight procedures, mandatory bias training for staff, and a completely restructured disciplinary system that couldn't be influenced by donations or family connections. Maya finished her senior year as class valedictorian, her grades and achievements now impossible to dismiss or minimize. Her valedictory speech focused on the power of speaking truth to authority and the responsibility of institutions to protect all students equally. 6 months later, Maya received a letter that made her father smile with pride. She had been accepted to Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service with a full scholarship. Her application essay about fighting institutional corruption had impressed admissions officers who recognized the marks of someone destined for public service. "You know," Marcus said as they celebrated her acceptance, "when I taught you those skills, I never imagined you'd use them to take down a high school administration." Maya laughed. "You taught me to fight for what's right, Dad. You just didn't specify where the battlefield would be." The real victory came in a letter Maya received from David Kim, the sophomore who had thanked her months earlier. He wrote to tell her that he'd been elected to the student council and was working with the new administration to create a peer mediation program for harassment complaints. "You didn't just save yourself," he wrote. "You saved all of us who come after you." Maya framed that letter and hung it in her dorm room at Georgetown, where she was majoring in international relations with a focus on human rights law. She'd discovered that the skills her father had taught her, observation, analysis, strategic thinking, and moral courage, were exactly what the world needed more of. Years later, as Assistant Secretary of State for Civil Rights, Maya would look back on her time at Westbridge Academy as the moment she learned that justice wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you made happen. The bullies who had tried to break her had instead forged her into exactly the kind of leader the world needed. She never forgot the lesson that her father had taught her. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with truth, courage, and an absolute refusal to accept that things have to stay the way they've always been. And sometimes the most powerful weapon against institutional corruption is a 17-year-old girl who knows her worth and refuses to be silenced. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.